needs to be urgently heeded. International peace and security are the business of all, and Africa, a continent whose resources ranging from material to human, helped to build the West out of poverty to affluence from the 13th century up till today, cannot be expected to continue to play second fiddle at the United Nations Security Council or in any international organization as from now. The Gambia remains resolute in her stance that the permanent and non-permanent membership categories of the Security Council should be equitably distributed regionally and expanded to conform to current geopolitical realities. The Gambia stands by Africa's demand for 2 permanent seats as well as 2 non-permanent seats as clearly articulated in the Essilvini Consensus and SIRT declarations. For how long, Mr. President, will the international community continue to ignore the legitimate right and aspiration of a continent of 53 states, all members of the General Assembly? The calls have been very loud and very clear, but some Western powers continue to ignore them. This must end, or you will see a very dignified, determined and independent Africa assert her legitimate rights worldwide in her own way. Mr. President, my delegation strongly condemns the application of unilateral and degrading coercive measures as a means of settling disputes. Such measures have an adverse impact on the lives of innocent people who lack any means of defending their legitimate sovereignty in the face of massive military might. We find the continued application of these measures against the peace-loving people of Cuba to be inhuman, unjust, and a blatant violation of the basic human rights tenets of the UN Charter, which ironically were promulgated to prevent such behavior in the first place. It is in this spirit that the Gambia shares the views expressed by the international community in the continued unequivocal opposition to the United States of America's sanctions against Cuba. The embargo against Cuba, Mr. President, contravenes the fundamental principles of international law, international humanitarian law, the United Nations Charter, and the norms and principles governing peaceful relations among states, violating the sovereign equality of states, and of non-intervention and non-interference in the domestic affairs of other member states. The embargo has no legitimate or moral justification, given the fact that it continues to undermine the fundamental basic rights to economic emancipation and the development aspirations of the Cuban people. Mr. President, as a responsible member of the international community, the Gambia therefore joins other member states in calling for the immediate repeal of such laws, measures or policies that impede the free flow of international trade and navigation against Cuba. Mr. President, we reiterate our call for a serious and decisive reassessment of our policy towards the Republic of China, Taiwan. The concerns of 23 million hard-working and peace-loving people of that great country continue to be ignored. The Republic of China, Taiwan has a democratically elected government, which is the only legitimate government that defends the interests of the people of Taiwan in the conduct of world affairs and in its many serious interactions with each other and every nation of the world. The Taiwanese people have the same concerns as us all over global problems. Yet they are not a member to the vital organs of this global body to contribute their share in the search for solutions to these problems. Mr. President, the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory remains pathetic as a result of decades of collective punishment, consistent with glaring, degrading, and inhuman treatment of innocent civilians, gross denial of access to humanitarian assistance and basic services, essential medical supplies, and construction materials to Palestinians have become the daily rule rather than the exception. The pattern and frequency of these human rights abuses, as well as disproportionate use of force perpetrated by the occupying power, continues unabated. The Gambia is of the conviction that the ongoing seizure of Palestinian lands and properties to make way for illegal settlement activity is morally and politically unacceptable. Such uncalled for behavior on the part of Israel is a blatant disregard for international law and casts serious doubt over Israel's intention for genuine and lasting peace with its brothers and sisters, the Palestinian people. Mr. President, how can the international community and the UN continue to watch in silence such glaring injustice and protracted human rights abuses without feeling an iota of guilt for not taking bold and appropriate steps to put an end to them? How long should we allow such blatant disregard for international law to continue unpunished? While we welcome the resumption of peace talks between Israel and Palestine, it is hoped that this time around, the brokers would be decent and honest enough to ensure that both sides would demonstrate genuine commitment to the two-state solution that would eventually usher in permanent peace and security in the Middle East and beyond. In conclusion, Mr. President, we live in a world of new and evolving threats, threats that could not have been anticipated when the UN was founded in 1945. Unilateral bullying and criminal invasion of resource-endowed sovereign states under the pretext of strengthening democratization, combined with terrorism, organized crime, poverty and diseases, remain serious threats to global peace and security unless appropriate steps are taken to eradicate these malpractices. Meeting such challenges today calls for sincerity and honesty to mount well-coordinated and concerted global efforts. The Gambia family believes that socio-economic development and respecting the sovereign rights of countries to control their own natural resources, especially mineral, should be the collective line of defense for a collective global security system that takes the sovereignty of each nation seriously. Combating poverty will not only save millions of lives, but also strengthen states' capacity to combat terrorism, organized crime, and intrastate conflict. We need renewed and genuine global partnership and commitments that are binding